Now, our presence there gives them time, as I've said, but the time should be focused on what they can do for themselves. Now, right now, we've seen a fanatical approach. You've got zealous Sunnis, zealous Shias. They have their beliefs, they have their traditions and their customs that they want to have dominate over the other, even though they're both practicing Islam. But we have the problem of martyrdom. Martyrdom is practiced, and this is a form of glorification that they have, and that's part of their belief structure. But our presence there can also provide them time and duration and an ability or a form of psychology to think of other things other than religious beliefs and customs which can dominate their lives. Our presence can give them time to think about liberty, equality, and fraternity. In the late 1700s, the French Revolution provided the French people enough time to think about liberty, equality, and fraternity, and to put aside and to rest the religious ideologies and fervor that also had been developed at that time in French Revolutionary history. We're talking about 1780s and so on. Now, the presence of our troops would also prevent what's called an implosion. An implosion really is a caving in of the entire structure or social cohesion that they may have. And if we have our presence there, it is telling them that, look, we're preventing any type of regression to a point that there's an implosion and everybody's swallowed up in a form of chaos, hysteria, lack of organization, and just complete social breakdown of the society. So our presence there is, in a way, preventing that. At least there is an element there that is forming some form of stability or foundation to help prevent that. It doesn't look like the implosion has completely taken place. There is at least some form of organized society there that the people are using for their own benefits. It's sad to see that there is so much in bombings, explosions, and activities amongst themselves there. However, a presence of our forces, and I should say other forces as well that have joined in on the effort, really provides some form of foundation that prevents a complete collapse of that foundation into what would be an implosion. The presence of our forces there also helps reduce the formation of what you would call outlaws. I have talked about other groups there and factions that may have a desire to bring about more of the social chaos so they could benefit, but outlaws in and of themselves who see a strong presence, they see motorized equipment, they see tanks, they see troops, they see all kinds of sophisticated military, industrial, complex hardware, they too would have to think twice or even three times before they'd want to formulate their outlaw-ship into something that would hurt the nation or even confront our presence there. Another vital concern that's important in the overall concept of their society is what's called revolt of the masses. Ortega y Gasset had written a book years ago on revolt of the masses. What our presence is doing there is in effect also acting as a cushion on any overall revolt of the masses. Now, just imagine a mass type of hysteria or a unified thought of masses, and what I mean by that is really the entire nation speaking in one voice or acting in a unidirectional manner. That could be considered a revolt of the masses. Now, whether it would take it to a form of benefit or to detriment, we haven't seen yet. There's so much factional fighting in the country, it's sad to say. There really hasn't been one unifying voice in this area. But of course, it is believed that our presence there and our troops and our military operations there is again putting a form of a buffer or cushion, as I've said many times, to prevent this from happening. And I believe it has prevented it from happening. So this concept of a massive revolt of the masses, whether for good or for evil, has been neutralized by our presence there. Now, the idea of revolt of the masses has a psychological aspect, and that's what Ortega y Gasset references. And in referencing that, he is going into an area of psychology in depth about how people can react. And it really can go on a concatenation. It can build, it can extend, it can grow. But our presence, I believe, has neutralized that. Now, another aspect of why our retention there and keeping forces there is that it also gives us a military preparedness for the region. If something were to happen in an adjoining country that was of serious consequence, we would already have a force element there. And of course, another underlying reason, which is on the economic side, is that we are justifying the military-industrial complex by having our presence there and pouring billions of dollars into this area of the world. All right, let's switch over now to the reasons or principles for our reason to depart Iraq. One of them is that we will really shift our national emphasis from military imperialism on the world scene. In effect, if we depart, we're telling the world that we're shifting away from a military imperialistic view of conflict resolution in the world. And I think that's important because prior to the conflict, it's originating in approximately March of 2003, there was vehement and vociferous type of discussions in the United Nations. I remember how strong France was trying to tell us and the world we should stay out for various reasons. Another is that the billions of dollars that are going into Iraq now could be reallocated for domestic activities and purposes. Just imagine all these billions of dollars going into the national economy in all kinds of ways. Infrastructure rebuilding, small business loans, and whatever other categories to stimulate capitalistic production. Think of us departing there as a form of showing that we have other than military solutions to international problems. That kind of relates to the first principle I mentioned, but just think of us going, how we would show the world that problems like this can be solved in other ways, other than a military approach or a form of presence in the country using military means. Now, our departing would also emphasize the civilian decision-making aspect of the United States. Right now, there seems to be a tendency of the executive branch, military-industrial complex, ruling or making the decisive decisions here in this area. Us departing would go back to emphasize the civilian aspect of it. Theoretically, the civilian aspect is the one that's supposed to control our activities in domestic and also international matters, but us departing would emphasize that. Of course, I mentioned briefly that us departing would tend to diffuse the executive branch power that has been taking place. Because currently, much of the funding has gone through what they call supplemental appropriations, and this process is where the actual request goes directly to the appropriations or the budget committees on an emergency level, avoiding the regular congressional process. Now, in the political interpretation, the executive branch is getting the upper hand here because they emphasize the troops need the equipment, supplies, hardware, whatever they are required to have to maintain and or protect themselves and have a presence there. The executive branch can make it a form of exigent circumstances, meaning it's needed now, right away, without delay. If we get out, it will have an effect of going back to a regular congressional process where time is needed, where more discussion is required for these massive billion-dollar appropriations that have taken place. Of course, us departing too would show our people in the world that we're less glorifying war and what the war means. We're reducing the war aspect in terms of a solution to international problems. we would indicate that we're downplaying that, we're going away from it, and that can have a beneficial consequence.